Hello again, welcome back to the War Game Imperial Guard Tactics video. Now before we get into today's video, I'd like to say a huge thank you to Glenn Burdett for sending in some awesome pictures of his Mordian Iron Guard objective markers. These things look absolutely awesome, and it's always really important, guys, to try and add that extra level of immersiveness to your battlefield. I am guilty of it, and many other players are as well. Simple enough as putting down, look, a little plastic disc or a little plastic objective marker, but what is really cool is when you actually build your own custom objective markers, and it adds that extra little bit of narrative. If you've got maybe an injured person or a statue in this case, or a cache of weapons, it's always really awesome. And it's always also good not to necessarily place them in the best place. Sometimes it's okay, if you're having a narrative game, to place an objective in what looks like a strategically important location, like a hill or a building. So anyway, thank you for sending these in, Glenn. They look absolutely awesome. If anyone else has got any cool pictures they want me to use in my videos, please post them on my Facebook page. There will be a link down in the description below. Now, without further ado, let's get into today's video, and we're going to continue with the theme of objectives, and we're going to be looking at secondary objectives and the Imperial Guard. Now, we spoke last week about primary objectives and how you can win the game if you focus solely on primary objectives and you don't worry too much about your secondaries, and that if you just essentially, to win on primaries, what you do is you have to really deny your opponent those primary victory points. And it's not necessarily about what you're scoring, it's about what you're stopping your opponent from scoring. With secondaries, it's pretty much the polar opposite. So one of the interesting things around the new 9th edition missions is the way primary objectives work. It's pretty much the same every single mission, which is that you hold one objective, you gain 5 points. You hold two objectives, you gain 10 points. If you hold more objectives, you get an additional 5 points, up to 15. But you cap your primary objectives at 45. So even if you held every objective every turn, you're only going to get 45 points. So it's almost interesting, like, you don't need to hold the objectives every single turn of the game. And when you actually look at that, hold 1, score 5, hold 2, score 10, what you realise is that if you just hold 2 primary objectives all games, all you put your efforts into, I'm just going to hold the one in my home deployment zone, one in the midfield, I'm just going to put all of my army into doing that, then you're still going to almost max out primary victory points. You'll get 40 out of 45. And the reason this is so important to understand, and I know we're talking about primary objectives again, but it brings me on to secondaries in a minute. The reason it's so important to understand is it highlights the weakness of the go all in on the primary objective strategy. Because if your opponent realizes that he's playing, Imperial Guard, and he realizes that your plan is going to be to deny him primary objective points, then he can counter that by simply going, I'm not going to spread myself too thin. I'm going to put, 500 points to defend my home objective and 1,500 points to just hold one of those middle ones. And I've got 40 out of 45. And if it's a 4 objective game, then the guard player is only going to get 40 points as well. And even if it's a 5 objective game, and the guard player, or 6, and the guard player controls 3 or 4 out of 5 or 6 objectives, then he's still only got 5 more points than you. So you've countered his go for the whole all in on the primary objective strategy. And then it comes down to secondaries. So as Imperial Guard, obviously it is really important to try and win that primary game. But it's also extremely important to be able to take good secondaries that will allow you to score points really highly, and that's what you need to do. Okay, so we're going to look at secondaries now. We're going to look at them from 2 perspectives: 1, how your opponent can score them from you, and 2, what you need to do to score your secondaries. Because the interesting thing about secondaries is that, unlike primary, it's all about what you're scoring, and it's almost, you can't really do much about what your opponent's scoring. Okay, so like I said, it's almost the opposite of the way you do primaries with secondary objectives. So I've mentioned this a few times on the channel, so I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail here, but essentially, Imperial Guard do struggle with bleeding secondary points. Because of the way that Thin the Ranks works, the fact that it takes into account vehicles as well, and the fact that most Imperial Guard armies are encouraged to take a nice balance of tanks and infantry. That's a classic Guard army, looking at 60 to 80 to 100 infantry, backed up by 4 to 6 vehicles. That's a classic Guard army, as old as the game itself. That kind of army, unfortunately, suffers very badly in 9th because of the way we bleed objectives. So, if your opponent was to see that kind of army, he would instantly, if he had any wits about him, pick the following 2 objectives. He'd pick Thin Their Ranks and Big Game Hunter, or Bring It Down. I can never remember which way it is. It's the one that scores you vehicles. And the reason that's so important is it means that your opponent has 2, because those are in 2 separate categories, so he can pick both. Your opponent will gain lots and lots of secondary victory points for doing what he wants to do anyway, which is kill your stuff. And the way Imperial Guard durability works is we don't have unit by unit durability. We have army-wide durability. So individually our units are very easy to kill, but we have lots and lots of them. So we have redundancy, we have army-wide durability. That's a problem in 9th, because 9th doesn't take into account army-wide durability. It only takes into account unit by unit durability. So if your opponent gets lots of points for just killing stuff, not like a percentage, but just raw killing stuff, then any Horde army, especially Guard, is a disadvantage. So if your opponent takes Thin Their Ranks and Big Game Hunter, then what happens is he will get 4 victory points for each vehicle that he kills, because each Leman Russ, for example, because he'll get 3 for the vehicle objective and 1 for Thin Their Ranks, because it's models with 10 wins or more give you a full point. So if your opponent, if you've got 5 or 6 Leman Russes and your opponent's going to want to kill those anyway, every single one of them that he kills gives away 4 points. And then every single individual infantry squad that he kills also gives away a full point. So you can see very quickly that all your opponent has to do is just really focus on killing your stuff, and he's going to be racking up lots and lots of points. So how can we mitigate this? So the first thing you have to understand is that there's 2 ways you can play the secondary objective game. In terms of giving away points, you can either build a very unusual Guard army, which feels wrong but is probably right for 9th edition, or you can accept you're going to give up 1 category of killing victory points, but that's the only one you're going to give up. So we'll go through this one at a time. So if you take an army which is an unusual Guard army, this is the one that we've touched on before. You're looking like a Bulgarin Scion army. Okay, so the principle behind the Bulgarin Scion army is that it's extremely meta for 9th edition, because 9th edition is all about elite infantry. Games Workshop put out an article this weekend on what are the top Space Marine killers, and it was lots of ways of killing elite infantry. And so the plan is if the game is all about elite infantry, and you can try and be anti-meta, but it's not going to work, the way to win is to be meta. Is to play the game. You're in the there's an old expression: don't hate the player, hate the game. But you're in the game, so you might as well play the game. Is what I always say. So with that case, you look at Scions and Bulgarins. Bulgarins are very elite infantry. 2 up save, 3 wounds, toughness 5. You don't get much harder than that on a nice 43 point package. Not too shabby at all. Even makes Terminators blush. Now, they don't give away any Thin the Rank points really. Even if you took 27 Bulgars, you maxed out Bulgars, you're not even giving away 3 full Thin the Ranks points, and that's like half your army. It's like 1,000 points. And Scions are all in little 5-man squads. So again, they're not going to give away too many Thin the Rank points. You're not going to give up any Bring Them Down points, or you're going to give up very few. You might take a few transports, but as long as you're giving up less than 10, It's fine. And you're able to play the primary game, because Bulgarians are going to be easily up to certain objectives, and Scions are going to be bringing a lot of fire support. No, if you just took 6 squads of Scions, 3 Scion command squads, and just put them all with plasma, and took 3 Tempesta primes, that's fine. That's a lot of plasma. And you put a plasma pistol on each one of those squads, you're looking at 15 plasma guns in the squads alone, and then an additional 12 from the sergeant plasma weapons. So, you know, you're looking at close to 27 plasma weapons in your army. It's a lot of damage to 2 shots, and there's nothing stopping you taking 2 battalions and taking more basic Scions. Nothing stopping you from doing that. You could even go down the Krieg Grenadier route on Bulgarians if you wanted to, because Grenadiers are cheaper. You take a Bulgarian veteran detachment, what do I call it? Elite detachment, sorry, and then take a battalion of Kriegers. You're still not giving up too many points. Even if you make them 10-man Krieg squads, you're still not giving up too many points. So, or you take 2 battalions, you can work it out. My point is that you're not giving up enough within the ranks. You've got plenty of firepower. You're not giving up any bring it down. You're only taking 3 characters. You're not giving up any assassinate. And what you have is an incredibly durable army with lots of firepower. Weird though. Doesn't feel like a guard army. You know, you're taking the 2, support elements, the Auxilia and the Tempesta Scions, and you're making them to a full army. So, whilst powerful and good and right and very ninth, and we're already seeing reports coming back from the front lines that this style of army works very well, doesn't feel right for a guard army. No Leman Russes, no guardsmen. Feels a bit wrong to me. But anyway, so that's one way you play it. The other way you play it is, like I said, you go all in on one of, and you just accept you're going to give up one of those secondaries. So you go pure infantry. You go pure infantry, and you go, I'm going to turn up to the battlefield with 200 plus guys, 200 to 250 guys. I am going to give up in the ranks. There's nothing I can do about it. However, I'm going to give up no other secondaries. I'm going to give no others. I'm going to put vox casters everywhere, so all my characters are 18 inches behind the front lines, and so they're never going to be in danger. And we just have waves upon waves of infantry, and they do play the primary game well. You may even with your opponent trying to deny you, you'll probably take the majority of the objectives for at least 2 to 3 turns of the game. So you'll be playing into the primary side of things, and you'll be denying a huge amount of secondaries. You'll be giving away 15, but that's all you'll be giving away. And likewise, you could go the other way, and you could say, I'm going all tanks. I'm going to take 6 squads of 5 Scions, so I'm barely giving up anything in the ranks. And I'm going to take a Steel Legion style force, all Chimeras, all Leman Russes. I'm going to turn up with, between 12 and 15 vehicles, and that's fine. And I will give up bring it down. I'll give up 3 points per vehicle, but I won't be giving anything else up. I won't be giving up any assassinate. I won't be giving up anything in the ranks. That's it. So that's 2 ways to play it. Now, personally, I feel like the infantry way is the better way of doing it, simply because you can play the primary game and deny on the secondary game. Overall deny on the secondary game. Okay, so that's you guys know I'm an infantry commander, so I am going to be a little biased towards that, but I accept both ways are totally valid. Now, we've talked a lot about denying secondaries. Let's talk about actually scoring secondaries now. If the important thing to do when scoring secondaries is if you're trying to win on secondaries, and we're talking about this from an Imperial Guard perspective, it's better to choose the ones that don't require you to interact with your opponent. So what do I mean by that? Well, in the current meta, in 9th, God, I'm going to get sick of saying that meta word soon, aren't I? But it's very much the word of the week, word of the day. So in 9th edition, it's all about durability. So Guard have great firepower, but we don't quite have the firepower, I would say, to win a game purely by just shooting stuff to death. The reason for that is there's a lot more terrain around these days, and digging people out of terrain is really hard. And we've talked about how especially when the 2-win marine thing comes in, the lasgun will essentially become essentially useless, even to the point of spamming hundreds and hundreds of them won't yield great results. They're very inefficient. So sure, we can blow armies away, don't get me wrong. There'll always be those games when it happens, but we're talking by and large, with the way durability is key and the way cover's taking over and people being able to get feel no pain across the board and invulnerable saves across the board relatively easily, it's very difficult to reliably blow your opponent off the table. You can do it, but it's not going to happen. It's unlikely to happen every game. So based on that, unless your opponent is turning up with something very obvious, you probably don't want to be taking the ones that require killing. There's always a caveat. If someone turns up with hundreds and hundreds of Orc boys, green tide, you'll probably take them the ranks. If someone turns up with loads and loads of rhinos with people in and full mech list or something crazy, you might want to consider it. But otherwise, you don't really want to be taking the kill ones. Again, exceptions are if someone is running characters like marine characters that love to get stuck in, like Blood Angel ones, you might want to take Assassinate just to voodoo them, because they're going to want to get those characters stuck in, but then they know every time they send one in and then it dies, they're giving you 3 points. So there is always take Assassinate into account, because Assassinate will be one of those that against certain armies will really mess with how they want to play, and either they do play them like Smash Cats and they throw them in and then you're getting 3 points a time nice and easily, or they don't use them and you've almost you've denied your opponent some assets there. So Assassinate is the one caveat for that. But the ones you want to be looking at are things like Engage in All Fronts, are things like Line Breaker, are things like Repair Teleporter Homer, and to a certain extent Raise the Banners High. Okay, to a certain extent. Raise the Banners is an interesting one though. So going through those, Engage in All Fronts can be a very easy one for Guard to score. Max points, very easy, because we have access to things like move. We have access to cheap deep striking units. So you'll always have an order spare. You'll always have an infantry squad that you can move 6 inches, advance, move 6 inches, advance. You should get into a table quarter there, easy peasy. And if we're going down this route of I'm going to give up in the ranks, but I'm not going to give up anything else, it's easy enough to do that. Or if you're going down the Scion route, you'll always be able to drop another 5 Scions in somewhere in a table quarter and get the points for it. So Engage in All Fronts is really good, and it's easy to max out. Even if you don't max it out, you should easily be able to get 10 plus points on it, and that's a mark of a good objective if you can get 10 points or more. Okay, Line Breaker. That's more for the unusual Guard army, the Scion Bulgarian army, because you're going to be wanting to drop down your Scions 2 at a time into the enemy's deployment zone. Scions have got a very small footprint. You'll be doing it anyway because you'll want to be shooting them, and they're always going to have. You want to be threatening their backfield objective. So, Line Breaker is great for the unusual army. You've then got Raise Teleporter Homer. Now this is an interesting one for any Guard army. The way you want to do this is interesting. So what you want to do with Raise Teleporter Homer is you want to essentially use a character to repair the Teleporter Homer, and then you want to surround that character with just meat, just to make them survive. 2 ways of looking at this. You can outflank a unit of Ogrins or Bulgrins. I do mean Ogrins. They're cheap. That's the important thing about Ogrins. They're cheap. You don't mind if they die, and they still toughness 5 with 3 wounds. So, 5, 6 of those guys with a junior officer in the centre of them, or a commissar to give them a slight leadership boost, is going to be. I guess no, he wouldn't be able to do that in his action. So yeah, just a cheap character is good. Another way of looking at it is with conscripts. We've mentioned conscripts a lot. You take 30 conscripts, you bubble wrap a random character in the middle of them, and that character will spend plenty of turns just repairing that teleporter Homer. Or obviously you can use Bullgryns with shield wall, but I would want those Bullgryns to realistically be drawing fire from turn 1. So that's why I don't. Bullgryns are good, but even just a 10-man squad could do it, but I wouldn't recommend it with just 10. I'd either take Conscripts and outflank them using strategic reserves, or I would take a 10-man Scion unit and put a Tempesta Prime in the middle. Scions in cover with take cover they're on a 2-up save. That's difficult to shift, and they can do that from turn 2 onwards. So there you go. So that's how you want to use Repair, Teleporter, Homer. Now, all of those 3 you can score, and what's important about them is that your opponent will struggle to deny you. Okay, so this is what I mean with Line Breaker. Your opponent can't stop it. It happens in the movement phase. It's good. With Engage on all fronts, it happens in the movement phase. Your opponent can't stop it. It's all good. Repair, Teleporter, Homer. Obviously, your opponent can, in theory, stop it, but it's harder. And it's the same with Raise the Banners High. So with Raise the Banners, your opponent, you're raising the banners, but your opponent can try and deny them, but it can be hard if you're swarming over 3 objectives. It can be hard. Now the problem with Raise the Banners is that you have to have it on 3 objectives at least every turn to max it out, but realistically you can get it on 2 objectives no problem, and you're guaranteed to get 10 points. So that's kind of it when it comes to Guard and Secondaries. Honourable mention to while we stand, we fight. What you can do with this is, now I made an incorrect statement in one of my previous videos. I said you could do this with Sentinels and just keep them off the board for a long time. You can't actually. You have to bring reserves in turn 3. What you can do instead is to take a Valkyrie and put a couple of characters in it and just keep flying it off the board and keep it in strategic reserves, and then bring that one on, and that will get you 15 points for while we stand we fight. And all it requires is an infantry army with a Valkyrie and a couple of like Ogrin bodyguards or Lord Commissars or Power Fists. So that's kind of it when it comes to Guard and Secondaries. It's about, there's 2 ways to approach it. You play it full meta elite army, although that feels instinctively wrong, but it is actually the right thing to do. Feels unnatural, I should say, for a Guard army. Or you to give up 15 points for thin the ranks, and what you do is you say, I'm going to focus on ones that my enemy can't counter. My enemy can't stop me from doing. So there you go, guys. Let me know what you think. I hope this video has been useful. If anyone's got any comments, of course, let me know if I've missed anything. Please put them down in the comment section below. I do try and get back to as many comments as possible. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. And of course, as always, I'll see you guys next time.